Hello academic English students, this is Jake and welcome to our next session. We are going to be talking about comparison and contrast paragraphs, and this is an important kind of paragraph to learn about. Now, first of all, just as an introduction, what does the word compare and contrast mean? Well, to compare means to explain the similarities. That is, how are things the same, two things the same. And to contrast is to explain how something is different. Alright, the topic that we'll be talking about today is this: compare and contrast your generation and your grandparents' generation. Focus on your values and your grandparents' values. Now, we should note what a value is. A value is a belief or thing or behavior that's important to you, of a priority for you. For example, Westerners, like me as an American, really value punctuality, being on time. Other cultures might not. All right. To organize our paragraph today, we're going to use something called a graphic organizer. A graphic organizer helps us plan our ideas, and we're going to use a graphic organizer that puts our ideas into different groups. Now take a look. We are comparing and contrasting my values and my grandparents' values. The first box in the graphic organizer explains our similarities, and I did a little bit of brainstorming and I listed some ways that my grandparents and I are similar. And then in the second box, down at the bottom of the screen, I also listed ways we're different. And you can read those there about saving money, about being independent or more willing to ask for help, and then use of technology, and finally faith. So those were the differences that I thought of, and of course there are probably several more similarities and differences. I simply only wrote these. Now, how do we structure the paragraph? For a comparison and contrast paragraph, you have really two options. You can try block organization or point-by-point organization. Now, block organization is the simplest and easiest. You simply write a topic sentence, and then in the first part of the paragraph you write about all of the similarities, and in the second half you write about all of the differences. So you have two big blocks or groups of information in your paragraph, and then you conclude. Now, point by point is a little bit more sophisticated, but maybe better in some contexts. You of course put a topic sentence, but then you explain one aspect of the things you are comparing. And then you move on to the next aspect, explaining both similarities and differences. And then of course to another aspect, as many aspects as you have, explaining both similarities and differences. Let me give you an example. If I was going to use the topic for today, I could use a point-by-point organization to talk about me and my grandparents. I would start with a topic sentence, and then I could compare and contrast our patriotic values, and then I could compare and contrast our faith, then I could compare and contrast our use of technology. That would be a point-by-point way of organizing this paragraph. Now, I actually ended up using a block organization, but either way is fine. Now, what words can we use for comparison and contrast? You'll see a list here on the screen. You may pause the video to look at the words in detail, and I would encourage you to look at your textbook for more information about comparison and contrast words. But here are a few that you might use that might be helpful to you. Alright, now for every paragraph we write, we need a topic sentence, remember, with a controlling idea. That's a bit tricky for comparison and contrast paragraphs because you're talking about two sides of something. You're comparing two things and contrasting two things, and a topic sentence is a little bit harder to create. If you look at my sentence, it says, although I share several basic values with my grandparents, our differences make it clear that our lives are not the same in important ways. So the sentence is able to introduce both the similarities with the word share and the differences with, of course, the word difference. And the controlling idea is that our lives are actually different in important ways, but of course we talk about both sides. So the topic sentence should mention both sides, both the similarities and the differences, if at all possible. It's a challenge. Go ahead and try, and you might want to look at it and rewrite it until you get it as good as possible. Now it's time to look at my sample paragraph, and at this point you might want to pause the video to read the paragraph more carefully. I'm not going to read it all to you right now, but go ahead and take a look. Here it is. You'll notice the topic sentence, and then I used block organization, like I said. So first I talk about our similarities, and then I talk about our differences. And then I have a concluding sentence that summarizes both sides again. All right, take a look and then move on. Next, we're going to look at the paragraph in a bit more detail, specifically at the comparison words. I underlined the words I used to compare. Once again, you may pause the video to look at the words and how they are used in more detail. And finally, we're going to look at the contrast words. There are actually more contrast words in this paragraph because the paragraph actually ends up focusing more on the differences. Your paragraph might balance both sides, or it might focus more on similarities or more on differences. It depends on your topic and how you want to write. So here are the contrast words. You notice there are several. Some of them are repeated, like the word difference and differences. I want to point out the word while. The word while in this context is used as a contrast word, and notice there's a comma after the clause with while. Now that you've looked a little bit at comparison and contrast paragraphs and how to write them, I would like you to try. Your assignment is to write a paragraph comparing and contrasting your experience studying in school and studying at your university. I want you to follow the same kind of method that I did. First, use a graphic organizer. You can draw your own on a piece of paper. Draw the boxes, one box for similarities, and then draw two smaller boxes for differences to contrast what is different about studying in school and studying in university. And take a look at what you have written in your graphic organizer and decide on a format. Do you think that it's better to use block format or point by point? It's up to you. And finally, it's time to write. Write a topic sentence that includes both sides, similarities and differences. And then follow your format and write, of course, a nice concluding sentence that summarizes your main ideas. Remember to keep your paragraph unified. That means focus on the topic and the theme that I've given you, and you'll do fine. All right, thank you very much for listening.